Hello and welcome to this ZenWorks application virtualization tutorial on the basic steps to virtualize an application. Today we will cover preparing an operating system to be best used for building the virtualized application, installing the ZenWorks application virtualization utility, process of capturing the application, building the virtualized application, modifications, testing, and tips. In this scenario, there is an Access database that is running on MS Access 2010, and all the clients are moving to Office 2013. We need to remain on the Office 2010 for this legacy application database, and it must not conflict with the installed Office suite, soon to be installed, Office 2013. Applications may still try to reinstall profile components when switching between two versions on the same workstation. Current environment for packaging this ZenWorks application virtualization is a Windows 7 Pro 32-bit VM workstation with VM tools installed, and there is a Z drive to resources needed for the ZAV capture. First step is to install all Windows updates that are critical, rebooting and checking until 0 critical updates are to be applied. We'll let it go through these installs. Those are installed, so let's do a restart. Logging back in, we'll check for updates again. The idea is to have a plain operating system with all the updates necessary so that this particular application can run. No additional critical updates, so we're good to go here. Next, logged in as the local administrator, let's disable a couple of services. These services reach out, and we don't want to capture any processes that come on. Notice there is no antivirus on this device either. We want as little as possible going on, so we capture just the needed data. So background intelligence, we'll go ahead and disable this, along with SSDP discovery. It's okay to stop the services, but should you have to reboot to finish an install, they'll start again. So we just go ahead and disable them. Once that's done, you can remove unnecessary files. Software distribution download are the downloaded patches that we downloaded. You can remove those just to clean up the drive a little bit. Another one is Windows Installer, which is hidden. You can remove those as well. Then Windows Temp. So we can remove what is able to be removed. VM holds on to some of these, so it won't be able to remove all of these while we're up and running in the OS. Next, we can install the ZAV utility, which I have mapped over here. We'll go ahead and launch. Once it comes up, we'll go ahead and license the utility. If you don't license, the trial version will remain on for 30 days, after which anything that is created during your trial version will be timed bomb 30 days. So you want to make sure it's not the evaluation copy. Now you're ready to go. With that installed, we're going to go ahead and shut down the device and save this because now it is XAV ready. Now that this device is shut down, we can go ahead and take a snapshot of the VM. Now we have a benchmark. Let's power back up this device. Logging back in as a local administrator. We now need to copy the files for the installation of the application or load the media. In this case, I have a map drive to the Microsoft product, and we're going to run access runtime on this device. That's where we'll be installing it from. Up to this point, the workstation should have all the necessary resources to run the application about to be installed. Yet the device is as plain an OS as possible. If the XAV package deltas, which we're going to capture and build from, can be saved locally or to a network location, make that location available now. And we'll go ahead and make that location off of C. We'll create a new directory folder called XAV. This next step, we will be in the process of capturing the application itself. Let's start up Novell ZenWorks application virtualization. And we'll go ahead and do a capture before. Anything after this point will be captured as part of the application. So that is why it's stressed to make sure all your resources that are needed for this application be connected first before running this capture before. Finding all the file systems, the registries, make an account of everything that is on this particular OS so that it can compare differences after the application is installed. That is complete. Everything from this point on will be captured. So we can minimize this. We can then go ahead and run the access runtime 2010. So we have some prompts coming up. We can either close or continue online to complete them. Remember, everything you do is captured, so I don't really want to go online at this point because it'll capture all the websites and everything that I go to for this particular continue online issue. So I'm going to close. Let's see if we have it installed. Now you want to answer all of these also, but if we were to capture use recommended settings or install updates only, every time this application starts it will go check for install updates only or use recommended settings. So I'm going to set don't make changes and manually update this application with any of the latest service pack for this application. Since it is runtime, it's requesting a particular access database. We'll go ahead and hit OK. It will close the application. So I have under the Z a database we can use. I'll copy this local. If I copy it local, it will be captured if I don't remove it before we're done. So I'll put it under C, Zav. Within that is an ACCDE, an ACCDB, and VBA warnings that come up for the database. So now let's go ahead and open that database, creating a shortcut on the desktop. And we'll do MS Access 2010 runtime. And let's run that Access database. Now there are some security concerns. We can go ahead and select open to make sure it runs okay. It does run okay. I'm going to go ahead and close this application down, reopen it. Still have those security concerns, which are the VB security warnings. So I have a warning reg key that I want to put on this device to help eliminate that. Now if I should open it up, it opens up without any errors and functions. If this application required licensing, make sure you license it before you finish the capture. The other thing we want to do is go ahead and remove some of the files that we put in place afterwards. And make sure you empty your trash bin after doing so. Check your downloads, check your temp directories, and you should be set. Now we can open back up the application virtualization and capture the difference. If there's nothing else to be set, we can modify it after we have the package. Make new folder. You will now do another search on all registry files and so forth, and then do a compare and throw the deltas in that directory. We'll wait for this to finish. The capture is now complete, and what is displayed here is everything about Microsoft Access runtime that was installed and everything else that was changed. So if we went into the registry, for example, if we wanted to look at that registry change, which existed under current user software, Microsoft Office 14, Access Security Trusted Locations, and this VBA DB warning. Office, Access, Security, here's your trusted locations, and Security VBA warning. So that was all in this particular install and capture. These are all the files. If you decide you do not like that shortcut that we put on the desktop, you can see that it will end up on the desktop itself. You'll see that it's on the desktop here. And it will run within this virtualized apps. Okay, and you can see what the source path is from over here. If you decided you wanted to add the database into this virtualized application, you could do so just by injecting it. We're going to go to Program Files, and we're going to add a new folder called Production. We're going to add a file. Chapter 1. And I'm going to do the ACCDB and the ACCDE just for example. Now that we've injected our database files, we can now go to our startup file. In your startup file you have triggers. This particular trigger is set by default, since there's only one executable, as MS Access, and anytime anybody runs the executable, it will auto start. And it will use this particular command line location for the database. We modified this. And we're going to change this trigger to ACCDB. And we're going to take off auto start as a matter of example. Next, we're going to add a couple more triggers. What was our path? So I've created 4 triggers here so that we can run just the runtime version pointing to external databases, or the runtime version within the application itself. I need to make note of these particular triggers, so when I run the executable I can add those triggers to it. Now we need to browse to the location where we're going to store this executable. And I'm going to put it out here. It will save it as a type executable. Before we build, there are many other configuration settings you can do. You can time bomb this particular setup. You can guarantee that only ZenWorks applications run this, which requires a management agent to be installed. You can expire it by time bombing it. There's setups in here. You can modify different components and environment variables. If you're using multiple processors and you're not sure if it's going to work, you can play around with those, and many other settings. We're just doing the simple build, so we'll go ahead and build this. And we'll wait for this to finish. Now if we go out to our location, you'll see an executable is out here. Now since we don't have an auto start, we would need to put a trigger in for this particular application in the command line so that it will run. So let's do that. We're going to create a new shortcut. We'll browse out to the network drive. You can run this off of a network drive, and you can run them simultaneously. Now by just putting ACCDB on this particular shortcut, should be able to run that application. This error is because I didn't do my trigger correctly. One example of testing, go to multiples. We will want to make sure, one, we put quotes here, because any time you have a space, obviously you need a quote. These should be okay. And now we'll have to rebuild. We'll wait while that takes place. Ultimately, we'll be dropping this particular executable onto the desktop, so let's do that and simulate our workplace environment. Let's go to our computer, C, program files. We'll put all our XAVs in a folder under program files. There's one we just built, 213. Copy this, paste, continue. We'll delete this. We'll create a shortcut on the desktop. Modify this shortcut a little bit. And there is our application. Now if we created another shortcut, call this one ACCDE. Create two more. And let's go to the properties and modify these. This one should be good. Okay. So if we run this one, no VBA warnings, and it comes up just fine. That's running from, both of these are running from internal to the XAV itself. Now the external, we told the trigger that it was going to be in ZXAV chapter 01. This is running off the server, both external database. So now that we've done a preliminary test, let's go to a production machine and test it. Moving to our Windows 7 64-bit, we're going to go see that Office 2013 is on this device, and we can open up a blank database. We'll call it database 4. Let's go out and grab our XAV file. Copy. Since we created this on a 32-bit OS, and it's a 32-bit application, we want to put it in C program files, x86. We're going to create a new folder called XAV. We're going to drop that file in there. Now it will run from this location. If we create a shortcut, and we run this, it creates a sandbox on the local machine, and we'll execute that executable. In parallel with our other Access Database 2013. They run independently. If we look at Task Manager, you'll see that there are two independent applications running. Same with the processes. Now let's say we want to run this one from an external source like we did before. We need to make sure that our map drives is correct from our triggers. So let's see if we have that proper trigger. If we go to Zav, Access RT, and there's our Chapter 1, Chapter 2. So we should be able to do the same thing here. Now let's go ahead and run. There it is there. And there it is there. Any changes made to the external database will be saved out to the external database. Any changes made to the internal database that we're running off of will be saved in the sandbox. That sandbox location. App data, local, Novell, sandbox. There's our Office 2010, and it goes deeper and deeper and is separated depending on the changes. So that's your sandbox. If your sandbox ever gets corrupt, you can then remove it. Next time you open up your database, it will create a new sandbox. At any time, you can go ahead and open up ZenWorks Application Virtualization. And if you save those source files from that compiled application, you can then navigate to it. In this case, we've saved it over to C, and it's a snapshot file. And you can go ahead and remove the databases, because we actually want to run the databases in our final build from the network. So all this will have in it is the Microsoft Access 2010 runtime version. We can also go in here. We can put auto start on this one. And as long as our mapping is correct for production devices to reach this particular database, we can check auto start, and we should be okay with those settings. and then build. Make sure you save your source files and save this configuration so that you can go back to the source files if you need to modify them again. If we then go back to our production device, go to Z, here's our newly created one. It's considerably smaller. You can also leverage ZenWorks Configuration Management to create a bundle to drop this file locally and run it from a shortcut on the desktop. We should be able to run this particular access database at this point. The first time it takes a moment to come up because it's building that sandbox location. Alright, that concludes our testing. Now a couple of tips. If you named your virtualized app, for instance, -zav.exe, then you can configure ZenWorks Configuration Manager to be able to identify that app as software on the device. Put them all in their own directory, ms access 2010 RT, so you can easily know where your ZAV applications are. You can run a 32-bit ZAV application on a 64-bit OS environment, but make sure you put the ZAV executable in the C program files x86. This way it can find all the 32-bit host DLLs required to run this application. And obviously you cannot run a 64-bit ZAV application on a 32-bit OS environment. Please refer to any of the documentation to clarify any of the settings. So in summary, we have installed the OS, made it as clean as possible, installed the ZenWorks Application Virtualization utility. We did the process of capturing the application, building the virtualized app, and then did some minor modifications afterwards, plenty of testing, and we covered some tips. This concludes our ZenWorks Application Virtualization tutorial on the basic steps to virtualize an application successfully.